Well, I forgot to dissolve, Charles, but luckily today I'm not that upset about that. There's so many things happening. How are you, Charles?
I'm good. I see you brought with you your, is that one of your Hunter Biden paintings behind you that's on the wall there? Or is that something that the hotel
I
put
don't know.
in your room to make you feel
Yeah,
comfortable?
no, I forgot to mention, I didn't want to say anything about traveling, but that's my fault for not mentioning it. So let me just say briefly, um, no, we won't talk about that. You have a lot of important things to talk about. It's always so difficult when I'm traveling, Charles, to get a portable setup arranged and have everything working properly. But thank you for your patience. I don't know if people appreciate the incredible patience that you have. You know, my career in Hollywood, someone of your stature, a 26-minute fuck up would have me fired. So thank you for being
No,
calm.
don't worry about it.
And thank you to the
I'm
audience
generally
for
calm.
staying there with us.
Well, let's start with a compliment to the art department and to the concept here. Uncharacteristically, while you, I should say, were wrestling with technical problems that now are on the ground and out of breath, let's hope, Joe Biden actually started his press conference on time.
Oh
And
my
I
God.
watched little bit, a little bit of it, and it was so pathetically bad. I couldn't really bring myself to try to listen to this, total jerk. Try to explain. I mean, a man who could stand up and claim and have his team claim that he had managed the best withdrawal of American troops and materiel from a foreign theater of war in the history of the country, having left behind $85 billion in the hands of jihadists who may already be bringing some of that weaponry back across borders into Western countries, including into the U.S. The man who could do that in August and could then allow his team to claim, even though the number of jobs in the country total at this point, roughly around this point, are about 2 to 3 million under the peak pre-pandemic. A man that could allow his team to go out to the know-nothings in the political press and try to make the argument that his administration has been the most successful one ever in adding jobs per month, getting the math all wrong, is obviously somebody who is going to, I mean, he wasn't a no malarkey on the no malarkey bus tour. It's all malarkey all the time. And frankly, I've had enough malarkey in the last little while here. I don't need to hear more of it. So we'll wait and see what actually what happens during the press conference. If viewers notice something and want to send Jason a message or whatever, maybe we'll be able to comment on it. And some of you might be able to have the press conference in simultaneously with what we're doing. But it's really, this to me is Joe Biden has displayed an unnatural skill at being able to kick his own ass into oblivion. And especially in the last week, he's really, it's as if he's not put me in, coach. It's like, I think what I want to do this time is, why don't I try decapitating myself and then you can burn my body on live TV? I mean, I don't understand who is giving him advice at this point.
I mean, I'm with you, Charles. It's amazing that he would try and dress that thing up as the best anything rather than, I mean, normally, if somebody is, let's say, I don't know, something terrible about themselves, they generally just try to avoid talking about it, not try to tell you that it's excellent when it's terrible. But
yeah, it's like I'm sorry, Jason. I know that it was trouble for you 20 years ago when I took my tractor trailer and I ran it into your house. But I'm calling just to remind you of how sorry I am 21 years ago when I did that and, killed your kids and destroyed and burned down your house and you didn't have enough insurance and I didn't have any money. And I just want to bring this up, maybe not once a year from now, and I'll bring it up every, say, 5 minutes. That's what this guy is doing.
And so, Charles, we've got here some CNN commentary on it. Apparently, Joe Biden says he didn't overpromise what he would accomplish in his first year. I seem to remember him saying he was going to, get rid of COVID and do all this stuff that Trump hadn't been able to do. It does appear that more people have contracted and even died from COVID-19 during the time Joe Biden was president than did when Trump was president. And you know, I've been listening to this Robert Kennedy Jr. book about the real Anthony Fauci. There is some stunning detail in that book, and as I get deeper into it, I must recommend it to Crowdsource the Truth viewers who tend to agree with the types of views that you and I have. Robert Kennedy shares a lot of those views, and because he's a lawyer, he's going through this evidence so meticulously and raising points and details about things that we know generally, but this just really fortifies it in a way that I think people are going to want to read.
Well, there are, over the recent long sweep of history, focusing on England for a second, there have been periods of time when very powerful monarchs have relied on literally magicians to run the kingdom. In the case of Queen Elizabeth I, there was a man I think you know about called John Dee, D-E-E.
Right.
And he was somebody who, like Biden and like the Democrats and who support the Biden administration and Janet Yellen and others, he was somebody who believed he could turn lead into gold. He was an alchemist. And when I actually have one or more books about this guy, he was at the time thought to be really, really smart. And Queen Elizabeth, who survived a very difficult and lengthy reign as a female monarch, unmarried female monarch, at a time when that was a little bit unusual. She survived assassination plots and military misadventures, financial misadventures, et cetera, et cetera. She relied on this knucklehead, John Dee, who left behind, one of the books he left behind was written in no known language, kind of the same as Michelle Obama's thesis. And it remains a mystery. Nobody's been able to I think, I hadn't checked every day, but last time I checked, nobody had been able to decipher the supposed experts' writings or understand their significance. Yet, here you had a monarch and the English-speaking world, in effect, being micromanaged, socially engineered by this magician, this mystic. And similarly, this period in particular from January, February 2020 to the present has been a period where for too long we accepted the idea that experts are going to dictate to us how we should live our lives because experts know better and we are not competent to assess what these experts say. I mean, I'm struck today, for example, by the stunning contrast of the UK, which we can't, we can say what we want about the UK, they can make fun of us and we can make fun of them. But the one thing you can't say about the UK is that it has no scientists in it. It has no doctors in it. It has no history of inventing interesting cures and having interesting perspectives, because that certainly is not the case. And here's a country that was all in for the complete lockdown, triple masking, masks everywhere, just abruptly saying on the basis of the evidence that they have, with effect from sometime next week, no masking, nowhere, no how. I mean, and I don't know who's right, but the one thing I could say is that the draconian approach taken in Austria, a country I like, but a country that has produced some particularly odious people, including Hitler. In Austria, in contrast, they're beginning, if they haven't done already, the policy of enforced vaccinations. Yet in contrast here, the UK is saying, no, wait a minute. Abruptly, we're down this path for almost 2 years, but abruptly we're shifting course. That should tell you at the minimum that in this case, nothing is actually settled. We had something happened for sure. We don't know to this day what actually happened because the Chinese won't cooperate with us in getting to the bottom, nor will probably the spooks around Fauci cooperate with us in understanding the role that they and the Canadians and others may have played in the gain of function stuff around the world. So we really don't actually to this day know what happened. We do know that we were told by authoritarians at every level of our government that they knew best for us. And we even have chatter. I mean, I used to like Howard Stern, but I can't stand the man at this point. Now saying that if you're unvaccinated and you get sick, you should just be left to die. you shouldn't be treated if you're unvaccinated. I mean, he's a comedian. He was a good comedian. He's wealthy. His wife is pretty. He's living large. But I mean, that is just such a negative attitude to have about your fellow human being.
Yeah.
It's just absurd. So the contrast here should tell us that experts need to take a huge dose of humility, and they need to come back cap in hand, especially including that little stone elf Fauci needs to come back and explain. He sold to the president, to a bunch of people, the idea, President Trump, 2 weeks to stop the spread. Okay, and we certainly have taken 2 weeks. It's more like 104 weeks, or in another month or so. And, did we understand what the threat truly was? Was it as bad? I mean, was there actually a medical emergency where whatever this was, in terms of the number of cases, was more potentially dangerous to the human population than an ordinary common cold or flu? We don't know. But we do know that we've spent trillions of dollars around the world, that we've locked people into apartments and away from their jobs. We've had people fired because they wouldn't comply with the authoritarians. And here, Boris Johnson, now maybe it's just a political prime minister, maybe it's just political hot potato for him, and he's shifting out of the great trouble he's in for having attended drinks parties, multiple cocktail parties. Yeah. And I have as you know, I think, and we have a beef with Boris Johnson in that he was foreign minister in 2016 when Hillary Clinton and Mark Elias and the team, including likely John Brennan and maybe Barack Obama, used government resources and engaged in, to put it politely, extra legal techniques to hobble the Trump campaign, to spike the Trump campaign, and then when they couldn't successfully rig that election, to throw everything that they could against the Trump administration for 4 and now almost afterwards 5, almost 6 years. I mean, this is a disgraceful period. And actually, on a positive note, there's a very interesting Zero Hedge story that I noticed and sent to you this morning. I don't know if you had a chance to read it yet, but it's about a guy called something like Dalgleish, and he's a scientist, a medical doctor, a virologist, who gives chapter and verse about what he knew and suspected, and had written up in a paper that Fauci and the team spiked in March of 2020. And now he's come back to say and to argue that the way he was treated, and I'm sure he was persecuted, and people who are persecuted are entitled to feel that there should be retribution and full exposure for what happened to him. But if anything, the lessons I see in recent history are that when you are talking about science, and to a lesser extent math, but in particular science, you need to be open-minded, because sometimes the quietest person in the room has the most telling perspectives and is afraid of sharing those perspectives because they see what happens to people like this Dalgleish when he comes out and challenges orthodoxy. We should encourage the challenging, the peaceful, the harmonious, the polite challenging of orthodoxy. Instead, we have, on the other side of the aisle, we have people who are fully prepared to burn down cities, as they regularly do, to let criminals loose, to savage the rich, to savage the successful, to sell all kinds of false tales because they've gotten away with it for decades. And so this man's history here, I commend for people to study. Maybe he's exaggerating, maybe he's wrong, but I think our viewers would benefit from at least reading the piece and considering it. One of the things that leapt off the page to me was that this fellow took his early concerns to his big boss, who was, I think, the chancellor or whatever the title is of the University of London. And that's a man we've talked about in the past. We've even done an episode on it, Sir Richard Dearlove. And initially, according to this piece, which may or may not be correct, the doctor or the MD claims that Dearlove tended to agree with him, i.e. that there are scientific reasons that suggest the early version of the virus did not just leap out of nature, but likely was genetically engineered. So Dearlove initially agreed, but then probably ran it up the flagpole. The people were trying to stop Trumpy and others. And the Lancet, which frankly, I used to have reverence for Lancet magazine, but I will tell you what in my work with Celia Farber and Dottie Cherry and others have come to me and explained that Lancet, like many other magazines and peer-reviewed journals that used to be important, has become corrupted. There's the front section of Lancet, apparently, where any Nimrod, it's kind of like the New York Times. If you want to get your obituary in the New York Times in the old days, you could pay a certain amount of money and it would go into the classified section. But the people that the Times and its imperial wisdom determined were really noteworthy, they get stories written up. Many of those stories are written up in advance, and when the person passes away, they go into print. So similarly with Lancet, it is possible if you're a big drug company connected to a big drug company, or you've got a particular axe to grind, it's possible to get something into Lancet that isn't as rigorously peer-reviewed, shall we say, as other documents which are peer-reviewed. Now, when I bring up also the subject of peer reviews of academic journals, one of my children's, I'm not going to say who, most funny commentary to me was way back when that child said to me, when issues came up about grades and attention in school and stuff like that, I learned from this particular child that a fair estimate is that 1/3 of all peer-reviewed academic articles published in these famous, different types of things like Lancet and not simply in medical fields, but across social science, 1/3 are complete gibberish and garbage and were not checked and are inaccurate, materially false and misleading. 1/3.
Wow.
I would buy maybe, I'd say we're in good shape, and maybe the academic community should be listened to if it were 1/3 of 1% were gibberish, but not 1 out of 3.
Unbelievable. Charles, I want to take you back for a second. Sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned Canada, and I think it's very possible that Canada played a much larger role in this than we yet know. This article came out yesterday, and rather than, exploring this information and laying it all out so that everybody can make the best decision possible, liberals in Canada have asked the conservatives to reconsider their stance on the documents, to try to convince them to not want to see them. The government's resisted efforts to release these documents. That is just crazy. I mean, we should know everything that we can about these scientists that were fired from this lab, who traveled to Wuhan, who were investigating Ebola. And I think this is the scientist who was involved in this, was it ZMapp or something that was supposed to treat Ebola, and then they were using it for COVID. This doctor has basically just disappeared, and we really don't know exactly what happened.
Well, you do remember what Ron Klain's role was in the Obama administration. Ron Klain being Joe Biden's chief of staff.
Oh, what was
he? Was the Ebola czar.
Really?
He has no medical training, any kind.
Well, so this scientist is the co-inventor on 2 Chinese government patents. There's a lot of information in the RFK book about how the types of things you're describing happened, the things in the Lancet and whatever. I mean, the degree of financial control that is consolidated in Anthony Fauci and Bill Gates through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is astounding. I mean, even scientists in the beginning of this who I called to talk to and ask them questions about this, they just didn't want to go on record because they said, look, I'm not the person who can talk about this. You got to talk to this person at the lab. And they know that if they say something that's not approved, they're going to get fired. They have their house, their mortgage, their kids. They can't risk that.
Right. And you left out, I think, the Wellcome Trust, which we really haven't talked about enough yet. But the Wellcome Trust is another NGO or foundation that, because it's so big, I think it's maybe even bigger than the Gates Foundation in terms of financial size, has with the Gates Foundation and with their various Gordian knot links into academia, into media, into corporations, into investment firms. It really has, the Gates Foundation and the Wellcome Trust and other entities, have really been able to determine who the winners and losers are. Certainly in the medical field, the health field. And you look at all this, and I know I probably shouldn't harsh too much more on Chelsea Clinton, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's not Mother's Day. And you take somebody, you have had long experience with the healthcare industry. I have had less, but some. And back in the earlier days, you didn't have these layers of administrators and thinkers and global diarrhea experts like Chelsea Clinton with no medical training. And if you just look at the figures, I mean, again, I'm a numbers guy, more of a numbers guy than a talker, and for that matter, a doer. When you look at the number of medical doctors who are minted each year from the top medical schools, for starters, because I don't know the figures for every medical school, but the big endowment schools that have big hospital systems inside their core, and therefore have the ability to take a bright mind and give that bright mind a tremendous amount of practical experience within the institution itself before they're off practicing. The number of MDs at a Yale, at a Harvard, I don't know if those are the best medical schools, is pretty close to the same number that it has been for the last 20, 30 years. In contrast, if you look at the ancillary things, the doctorate in public health, masters in public health, nursing, there's a whole MBA, JDs, all the other degrees that cost a lot of money one way or another that somebody has to pay for. And therefore, when these overeducated people latch onto healthcare systems, as Obama did in the Chicago hospital system, for their then medium, less than $1 million, but more than $250,000 all-in per annum compensation, those bills get paid by somebody. And instead of looking at this and saying, we don't need some starry-eyed person who, like Chelsea, to be given special status, or she's going to have all these books that are promoted, and people will think that she actually knows what she's talking about. We don't need that person to think grandly about global solutions, having spent very little time on the front lines in places which are so radically different than the wealthy parts of this country, and even different than poorest parts of this country. Instead of training, if there are any IQ points and brain cells in that particular body left, instead of training them on some vague, unregulated global set of problems, let's focus on problems in Toledo, Ohio. Let's focus on problems in Manhattan. Even though Manhattan in New York is a wealthy borough, there are portions of it that are trending into chaos and have been doing so for a while. And so, I would have hoped, I know that in business, when I was actually working for other people, one of the things that we did decades ago was not just simply celebrate successes, but when we had a failure, and you're always going to have a failure. If you're not trying hard enough, if you don't have failures, you sit down with the people involved in the failure and you say, how did this happen? Could it have been avoided? Did we mitigate it enough? How lucky are we that it wasn't much worse? You spend time contemplating your failures. Now, I don't think right now Joe Biden is, his approach to dealing with failure is to paint it as success. There's no such thing as failure for him, even though he's the embodiment of failure.
It's crazy that they can try to sell that Afghanistan thing. I mean, the move there is just don't talk about it. It was terrible. Don't bring it up. But to try to tell people that it was good is absolutely absurd. Honestly,
if I can disagree with you just a little bit, I think the correct move there, and I'm no fan of Lyndon Baines Johnson, the correct move on the heels of Afghanistan would have been for Joe Biden to spend less than a week. I mean, the dude spends a quarter of his time in the first year in Delaware. And I got no beef with Delaware, but I do have beef with a politician who's never had an honest job in his life, owning 2 mansions in Delaware. And when we got a lot of problems in Washington, D.C. and inner cities and inside these borders, he's spending more than a quarter of the year at these 2 opulent mansions, which he doesn't He did not legitimately purchase. I'll just say that without knowing anything about the details of how he got. He certainly did not legitimately purchase those mansions. So the honorable thing for this man to have done around Labor Day would have been to give a special address honoring workers and to announce at a Labor Day celebration, I can no longer in good conscience serve as your president. I have let you down. I can't blame this debacle on anyone other than me. I am the president of the United States, and either I'm announcing today that I will not seek re-election in 2024, or a better case and an honorable thing for him to have done would have been to check the fuck out of the White House. Yeah. He didn't do that. And so this now creates a scenario where, I don't know if you saw the Union Pacific pictures of the rail tracks in Los Angeles and Long Beach, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Union Pacific rail tracks that are covered in boxes. You got, and I honestly, I don't know what my point of view is on extra time off when a child is born. Perhaps it is a good thing to encourage companies to give both spouses or partners a lot of time off. But, maybe that's for the person who did not actually bear the child, but it's certainly not 2 months. And this pipsqueak with a gigantic resume, but erected on a pathetic attempt to characterize his experience as positive, he is the one who should be standing up to explain what the hell is going on these train tracks out there in California. Why is Union Pacific, maybe it's just Union Pacific's fault, I doubt it. Why do we have these supply chain issues? Why did they come so suddenly? How much worse might they get? What does this mean for the price of goods and services that in particular poor people, the bottom 50% of this country, have to have? You don't have an option to come home with, you got 2 young kids. You can't say, well, look, instead of diapers, why don't you use Joe Biden's hat? You right?
Oh, come on, Charles. Joe Biden doesn't wear hats.
I'm saying is no malarkey bus tour hat. So to have this team, this is a team of dunderheads, one dumber than the next, in terms of practical experience, in terms of being able to read a room and see where we are. Stephen Moore, who I disagree with from time to time, but in economics, he's pretty smart. He points out that in the most recent period, and I don't know exactly what period it is, but I think it's a 12-month period, Americans have paid $4 trillion in taxes. There's no government on the planet, no single national government that comes close to that. So it's not like, for paying $4 trillion, and we're borrowing more than that to fund this monstrosity. It's not like we're in a place where, we should be saying, well, not really paying much for this government. What should we expect? It's a Chevy, or
it's a discount.
Yeah, we're not a Chevy. It's an Edsel. We bought an Edsel. We didn't buy a Bentley. We bought a Bentley here. Everybody's buying Bentleys, and you go out to look at your Bentley, and it's one of these broken bicycles from 1956. It's pathetic what these people are doing, and it's even more pathetic, frankly, that people are just sitting and complaining and not doing, and not trying to identify candidates that could fix things, getting behind them for 2022 and afterwards.
Well, Charles, I think Joe Biden put the bent in Bentley, because if we have a Bentley, it's a little something like this one. Not so good. In a ditch.
Yeah. Well, interesting, your friend, and I'm just pulling your leg a little bit, Joe Scarborough, apparently he erupted this morning and is excoriating Biden, saying that he ran as a moderate, he won, in quotes, as a moderate, but he's governing as a leftist, and that's just unacceptable. And sitting next to him, of course, is his second wife, Mika, spawn of arguable, let's say, link to Satan, Brzezinski. And the two of them must have gotten the message that, it's Biden out, and I don't know who is coming in. But I think the mainstream media has decided that they've had enough of this Biden.
Well, and certainly I think the first presumption would be that it's Kamala Harris. We haven't really heard anything about, her leaving or anything like that, right? I'm trying to bring up.
Well, actually, Molly Hemingway, who's a journalist, I think a very good journalist. I forget who she writes for at this point. I think maybe the Federalist or something. But she has a piece that's in Rantingly, which I would commend for people looking for an aggregator to quickly get to the bottom of what's really cool and going on. She has a piece on there that says there's no truth to the rumor that Joe Biden is going to appoint her to the Supreme Court because she's not competent for either job, vice president or Supreme Court.
Well, that's for sure.
And I think that's evidence. And again, this has nothing to do. Well, we started by saying that Joe Biden, who I believe identifies as white and male, is a moron, a Joe-ron. And what I found, bitter experience dealing with many different people and companies, is it is true, particularly in business, that a fish, as in nature, a fish rots from the head. And so if the top of a business is a Joe-ron, you can assume that the people inside the business are even dumber and less competent than the CEO. And that certainly seems to be the case here. I mean, and remember, this is not somebody who has a short history of fucking up. I mean, the first time he ran for president, he had this extravagant set of claims about his background and this speech that sounded really good, and people realized he just copied it line for line from Neil Kinnock's labor leader speech. And then he had to recant all the claims that he made about where he graduated in class, in undergraduate and law school. And I mean, and Bob Gates, who was in Obama's cabinet, a Republican, but in Obama's cabinet as defense secretary, wrote a book in which he said that Joe Biden has been wrong on every fundamentally important issue in his career. That's, it's amazing to me that our system would tolerate a veteran failure like this man. And it's even more amazing to me, and this is again how you learn from your mistakes. People could say that it was a mistake that Donald Trump won. You can argue that. You can argue it was a mistake that all these people won. But how do we explain the election results of 2020? If they're legitimate, which maybe they are, if they're legitimate, what were the people who got Joe Biden across the line thinking? I mean, we ran in when we were walking around a number of weeks ago to a guy. We were talking about something along these lines, and some guy heard us and, in a very obnoxious way, made a point of letting us know that he was still proud that he had backed him.
That was a few weeks ago, and that guy was out of his mind. But I think he was just looking for a fight, Charles. I don't see how anybody could look around. I mean, look, just by the numbers that they're telling us, right? There's more people getting COVID, more people dying of COVID, despite the vaccine, despite the things. We just had an article there on Rantingly that the White House is sending out, millions of N95 masks. I don't know, is that the most effective thing we could be doing right now when we're, as you point out, 2 years into this, and it seems worse than ever? The mask, it seems like a Band-Aid on a hemorrhage.
Well, again, if your objective were to destroy confidence in the integrity of the American system, and if you thought that there were a bunch of people, let's say in Beijing, who believed that that was a good move, because even if there was pain for, say, 10 or 20 years, you'd eliminate a rival and cement your position as the most powerful country for the next maybe 1,000 years or longer. So if that's your objective, to cause people to now not trust experts, if it is true, as that scientist alleges, that the virus was genetically engineered, maybe there's another one waiting in the wings that would target Caucasians or target, non-Asians, and you let that thing loose, and now you'd have people who were, I think, justifiably skeptical about Fauci and Birx and others, maybe not listening carefully enough to what true experts are saying about this next wave, if there is one. And the second attack does become far more deadly even than the first. So, I mean, this has been very poorly mismanaged, and I would argue that a lot of people have to answer a lot of tough questions. Whether that will actually ever happen is a big question. I mean, I would have thought that across the food chain, start in America, people like me who are conservative economically loathe monopolists, and monopolists are very dangerous people. And there are many people out there who are monopolists and who would like to be monopolists and are living big lives as monopolists. These people need to face justice, but instead, people like Gates and others have bought such substantial influence that at his age, I think he's roughly my age, he could probably stall any serious inquiry into what he was up to until he's gone. And
he's 66, Charles.
That's not
October 28th, 1955.
Right.
And what you're saying is exactly what Robert Kennedy addresses in his book, the method, the mechanism, the ways these guys do it, the agencies, the investments they have in different companies, and how they're incentivizing. There's even a transcript of a phone conversation where a doctor who's trying to create a new international kind of independent health agency of doctors, not something that's funded by billionaire globalists, and the conversation that she has with this doctor who is being pressured by things like, Gavi and all these different things that Bill Gates has money going into. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have had, there's an area, I mean, Bernie Sanders is he's got 3 extra O's in his Fruit Loop head. I mean, he's off the deep end. I don't know who's doing his tweets at this point, but the authentic version of a progressive who doesn't fly private exclusively for security reasons and have 3 homes. The people on the left, and I used to spend a lot of time on progressive radio, I'm happy to go on those type of channels, and people on the right like me should be able to say these antitrust enforcement laws have not been enforced. It's the opposite of enforcing. We have cartels, oligopolistic practices, monopolistic practices that have fundamentally harmed the interests of the average American worker, in particular, the interests of skill seekers, people who want to go and get a better set of skills by going either to an apprenticeship program or into what's left of academia. These people have been brutally harmed. And the angry scolds, whether it's Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, that idiot Elizabeth Warren, who get up there and say, I'm fighting for you. I've got to buy another house, or I've got to put another $1 million into my portfolio. Oh, wait, I got to leave this meeting because I got some insider trades I got to get done by 4 p.m. I mean, these people should be ashamed of themselves. And the very same people who are now, it's kind of a good thing to see, are outside AOC's office last Friday, criticizing her for her failure to oppose arms sales to Saudi Arabia. These people, and again, people like me on the right, economically, could in fact find common ground, I think, on this issue of monopolists. Big monopolies need to be broken up. And if there is predatory pricing or similar types of issues that has taken place as a result of the existence of these too well-fed monopolists, then there needs to be an accounting. And so when we have, I think the Joe Ron is pitching some idea about taxing billionaires more aggressively to fund these ridiculous social programs that he's trying to foist upon us. I don't think we need new taxes, and I don't think we need new programs. I think what we need are enforcement of the laws that are on the books. When was the last time there was a serious antitrust enforcement that resulted in any kind of breakup of a monopoly?
I think it was AT&T when Larry was at the Department of Justice. But did it do anything really? It seems like they kind of split apart, came back together. The technology has changed.
Well, I don't know if you're old enough to remember this time frame, but I remember as a child, in fact, because my father was working for AT&T. I remember that, if your choices until I was maybe after 10 years old, your choices of phone were, do you want a black one or a black one? You want a black one that you hang on the wall?
From that standpoint, it did help. And Larry frequently says that it played a big role in the mobile phone carriers and the development of that technology. So it was good. I think they should. I mean, we've spoken about it a million times, Charles. YouTube has given me a ton of problems. And that is another component of what's spoken about in the Kennedy book, how this control over media. I was speaking to somebody about this today, and I think I spoke with you about it. We've said many times that people didn't really fully understand what we were getting into when we all got onto Facebook and Twitter and provided all this information. Now these apps are on mobile devices that can tell these companies where we travel. They can start to develop years-long profiles of your habits, your behavior, that are used to feed predictive models. And now, similarly, when I had Michael Caine on the show talking about that company Fulgent holding people's DNA, we don't really know what's happening with these tests that are being done. Sure. And 10 years from now, what happens when you combine big data with the world's largest database of everybody's DNA? And we know that elements of the intelligence community, Department of Defense, are saying that China and other adversaries are working on genetically targeted biological weapons. It's pretty scary.
Right. Well, drilling down a little bit closer into detail, I think one area, and we've talked about this in the past, I do not agree with Mike Bloomberg's approach on forcing every restaurant when he's mayor to tell you how many calories each dish on the menu of a restaurant had, because I'm not sure calories alone tell you whether that's that's the most important thing to consider. But be that as it may, I think on the question of any time, and most of the ads we see now are, we'll give you a free this if you just agree to participate in this website or that website or another one. I do believe that in the case, for example, of Google, in the case of Facebook, in the case of a number of the other ones, where you get a free service, but the company is making 40 cents for every dollar of revenue after tax on the fact that you're participating in this free service. And that company is trading, those profits are trading at a markup of, say, 60 times earnings. I think before 10 and 12-year-olds and their parents sign up for Facebook, and the older people sign up for that. So you should be forced to explain to the potential user, yes, you're going to get services out of this that you won't have to pay anything for. Yes, that's true. But we are going to get, for every hour per week that you spend on this, we're going to make whatever the amount of money is off you. And you're not going to have any right to what we do with your content. Okay? That's the price you pay.
And we can throw you off at any time. If we change the rules and something you did a year ago, we decide we don't like you, you're out.
Right. And when you think about the history of America broadly, now being less particular, and you think about, we were originally founded with all the warts and errors and problems, we were founded as a group of dissidents, religious dissidents in many parts of the country, who sought an environment. In some cases, they didn't want more tolerance. They just wanted people only to be Puritans or whatever. But in other cases, they came to this country seeking a freer exchange of views, a more scientific approach to life. And to me, that makes a lot of sense, that we should continue, particularly with all these minds. There are many more people around today in America, 335 million, than there were in 1980 when I got out of business school. Wouldn't it be nice if the people today, with the tools that didn't exist in 1980, were engaged in a freer exchange of information to swap ideas, change thoughts on how to better our lives and future generations' lives, as opposed to being engaged in this hostile approach of canceling anybody who disagrees with some arcane provision of some piece of legislation or some interpretation of what an expert says might have happened.
Well, it's also
Wouldn't
happening to
that?
people who are speaking, you know, completely logical arguments. I don't know if you saw this press conference, maybe it was 2 days ago or something like that, where Ron DeSantis asked the very pertinent question, prior to COVID-19, did people just decide to go out and get tested when they weren't sick? I mean, what he's saying makes a lot of sense, but he's treated like a heretic because he's just basically saying, look, if you're not sick and you're going and waiting in line to get tested, you're preventing other people who might be sick from getting tested. You're exposing yourself to people who are likely to be sick. It's amazing. I mean, he's
Right. Well,
treated like a
he's
pariah.
right.
He is right.
Well, and every country is slightly different, but I was involved in an investment in the UK treating hospital waste in a company that had a decent market share for doing it. It wasn't the largest, but it was more than 10% of the total country. And what I learned, and my colleagues learned through that investment, is that the last place you wanted to go when you got sick in the UK was a UK hospital, because the danger of the disease that is in the hospital waste bins, the bits and pieces of body parts that are waiting in bins to be it's staggering how dangerous it was back in this is 20 plus years, almost 30 years ago. Maybe it's different now, but it does stand to reason that hospitals contain sick people. Sick people may be contagious, and so I don't know. I think this period, if we're lucky, there will be a positive but radical rethink of the healthcare platforms that exist inside the United States of America and other richer countries, and we'll have a radical or revisionist study, fair revisionist study of the power that was concentrated into the hands of somebody like Fauci and Birx and others who stay in these positions. I mean, when you look, for example, at the HIV/AIDS complex of people and now the COVID complex, there's a stunning overlap of people who were involved promoting the creation of the Global Fund in 2001, an organization which should be dismantled, in my view. It's part of the WHO, which of course Unitate is. The people who were arguing the Chicken Littles, who were arguing what they were arguing in 2001, were successful in scaring people into giving more than $100 billion to the Global Fund and now trillions to the COVID stuff. And is there going to be an honest accounting of what happened to that money? I mean, an insider, I know through somebody that an insider at the Global Fund with responsibility for checking into fraud estimated using internal data that 75% of all the money that went through the Global Fund in a period, I forget what the exact period was stolen. 7.5, not 7.5, not 0.75, 75%. And the approach, I think, was one we see anyway, and you see, and I think our audience sees, when you follow the tale of woe, and it's perhaps a good segue into what I want to talk about today a little bit, is when you follow the tale of woe of Ira Magaziner and Bill Clinton, the starry-eyed goons around the two of them, who saw a business model, which was, if you claim you have a healthcare problem and you work with our team to put in a funding request, we will get your impoverished country a lot of money quickly. And we'll make sure that nobody can check and see where that money actually went. And there are enough crooked people in the world, sadly, who are leaders of these impoverished countries, that many of them say, this is a capital plan. Sure, we'll say we've got a gigantic HIV/AIDS problem and that you're fixing it. What do we get each month and where do the checks go? And is anybody ever going to check any of this? And that really, I think, was the business model of the Clinton Foundation and its various health-related initiatives. It is the business model. And we have some interesting new news that we can share. I see you have, is it Angel Urena up there?
Well, yeah, because when you were saying that
Right.
there are, nasty people hanging around, he's the first guy who came to mind.
Doesn't he hail from the Dominican Republic?
That might be right.
Yeah, he does. So if we, I think I saw you. I don't know, you have it up there, or if we could just get it via Google. But if you go into open corporates, I had sent you a search result saying that, and I thought I saw
I'll
you
search
playing
for it
with
again.
it.
No, that wasn't it.
Open
What was
corporates, and you put in FUNDACION in Clinton, Fondation Clinton, in two separate words. And in the search results, you'll see one that is in the Dominican Republic that was an operation. It says it was in the Dominican Republic from August 15th, 2004 to August 15th, 2014. Okay, so that's an area. There are things that I can do alone, we can do as a group. Then there are things that the FBI and others should have been doing, and we're going to see if they actually did do them. And I often talk about business models. If the business model for this fraud is that you assert a need for funding that you know you're going to get from corrupt funding elements, and you then arrange for that funding to get routed towards the cause, but not necessarily into the hands of the treasurer of the cause, a nice nuance to fool people, let's say in Canada, who might be trying to track this down, not to say that Canadians don't know how to speak Spanish, but to set up, look at the name of this thing, which I can't read myself so easily.
It says Fundación Clinton para la Iniciativa sobre VIH. It's an initiative for health. It's the Clinton Foundation, HIV/AIDS health initiative or whatever it is.
In Spanish. So that entity probably can get a bank account in the Dominican Republic. It may be able to get this particular entity bank accounts in other parts of the world. And it may be able to team up with the Global Fund and assert the need for the Global Fund to give the Dominican Republic money to fight HIV and AIDS. So if we turn now, if we go to 990 Finder and we punch in.
What's 990 Finder? Is that new?
We've done it in the past, but it's another thing we can use. And you punch in Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative and look for the 2005 990.
Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS.
And pull that down if you can get it, and look at towards the end of it. There's a list of all the donors to this entity. It's not, I don't know if it's a Schedule B or an attachment to the 990, but it gives you a detailed list, actually far more detailed than most.
Wait a minute, it didn't
names,
find it. I must
dates,
have done
and
something
amounts.
wrong. I think I spelled initiative wrong. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Not that good at spelling, Charles.
That's all right. You're very good at managing the art department. So 2005, if towards the end of that document, if you can pull it down, you'll see what I'm talking about. Huh?
It says total assets 0.
At the end of the year, 0. Yeah, that's right. For the 2005 version. So 2004 and 2005. So go to the very end, and by scrolling down the left-hand side, maybe. And if you can pull up that the page, it appears to be a list at the very end of.
Is that it?
Donors.
Not this?
No, it's like a table of donors. The type is very there. It is, I think. And
really
if you'll see an entry, a donor called Copresida, COPRESI.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the amount there?
1.85 approximately. Looks like. Oh no, wait, sorry. Yeah, no, it's 1,847,653.
Now that's an agency of the Dominican Republic government. What is it doing, giving money to China? And actually, now that I think about it, if you go and if you remember Copresida and punch in Michael Smith with Copresida, you'll see he did a special story on this that bears reflection by John Durham and his team. Because remember, these monies that were flowing into Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, an entity that was never, I don't think, authorized as a charity, though the Clintons represented that it was, these monies sloshing around in 2005. And how come nobody noticed the fact that the Dominican Republic entity was a crock of bullshit, that the donor was a crock of bullshit? And how come nobody has, Michael Smith has made at least one referral to the FBI in Australia. Now they're locked down, no shrimps on the Barbie or anything else out there, no tennis to speak of. But this is, I think, a 1 or 2 part piece with a lot of information in it. And crickets, crickets. Do you see what I'm talking about? Or
yeah, he's got it up here about co-precedent. I thought he did. I clicked on the thing that said co-precedent, but I think it just takes us from Michael Smith News, and this is his current story. No, it's 2016. I don't know what happened there, Charles. I'm a little bit at a loss.
Okay. Well, so to go into deeply into the weeds for a second, but this is, I think, going to be amusing. If we go into Google, to say, if you can go into Google, and you can type in instructions, Form 990, 2004. Here's to get the instructions of how to fill out a Form 990 for the version of the form that the IRS sent to everybody in 2004. And then if you go to page, you want to go, you see this in the middle column there, there's specific instructions. They started around like pages at 16 or something.
Well,
no.
It says organizations and foreign. I don't know. Where do I find specific requirements for properly completed?
It's in the table of contents there.
What is it that we're looking for?
We're looking for grants. Line 22. How to fill out line 22 in that document. And it's line 22 in part 3.
I don't know. It's not finding that. I'm not.
But sure. If you can scroll down, just page. Let's start at page 20. And what section? I can't read the type there. So what? You pull up page 20. What section of the document are they explaining?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question or how to answer it. Oh, this heading, you mean? Program service revenue? Okay,
so this is you can go like 3 more pages down. That's the revenue section. Then they'll get to the expense section. We're looking for how to fill out line 22, which is grants.
Well, let me see if I can search the document for grants.
You're almost to the page there, Jason.
Okay, so we'll just keep scrolling.
And the reason for this is, if you give a grant to somebody, there's several ways you could give a grant, but the most common way is that you give a check. You either give cash, a check, a wire transfer. Money leaves a financial account and goes into the account of the recipient. That's called a cash grant. Now, Andrew Kessel and Ira Magaziner are smart enough, though I think both of them are stupid, to understand the difference between a cash grant and a non-cash grant. We're looking for the instructions in this document which make it plain that a cash grant is a grant of cash. It has to come from a financial account. Okay, and that in line 22 you learn, part 3, line 22, you learn that in addition to filling in the number for the cash grant, you have to provide additional information concerning when you made the grant, that is to say the date of the grant, the amount of the grant, the recipient of the grant. But beyond that, if you're going to say that you made a non-cash grant, you have to provide information concerning how did you come up with the value? How did you assign a value to this non-cash grant? Specifically in 2004, the assignment of rights to the National Archives to use for up to 200 years a portion of this double wide trailer presidential complex
Here we go.
as part of the National Archives. You found it?
Line 22. And just real quick, while you're talking about that, Charles, I saw a headline today that said that the National Archives are giving Trump's January 6th documents to the January 6th committee. And of course, Ray Epps is going to speak to them on Friday. I think it's just going to be more cover up. I don't know why he's not in jail. But what do you think about them turning over Trump's stuff and they're not doing anything with this?
Yeah, can we go into that at the end of this? Because I want to flesh this out a little bit. It's a good point you
line
make.
22.
But yeah, so you see the part in there that if you're going to do a non-cash grant, you have to explain how you came up with the value of this non-cash grant. So in the case of granting the use to the National Archives of portions of the library complex, you're going to have to say, well, how did you decide that grant was worth $36 million? You know, where's the work that says the fair market value of this right is actually worth that amount? You pull that out of your ass. You've got to say, you know, the building on the date that it was finished was worth whatever we think the whole building was worth. These portions represent the following percentage of the total building. This right extends past the useful life of the building, so we'll just use the percent. We'll either use take the cubic square feet of the complex, and then the cubic square feet that will be used by the National Archives, and use that percentage, or maybe you'll use the square feet, which I don't think is the correct way to do it because these spaces are very big. Some of them have, you know, multi-floor open spaces, and I don't think you should be just saying those gigantic auditorium spaces. Just use the square footage on the ground. You should be contemplating that these big spaces. It's difficult in a hot climate to keep them cool. May or may not be so difficult, and I don't know how cold it gets in Little Rock to keep them warm. But you expect to see a fair amount of work done, and the people who do the work should not be the contractor on the building, or the people in the foundation, or certainly not BKD or the lawyers associated with it. You should get somebody who has a national or international reputation, look at all this stuff, write a report, and donors should be able to look at this since it's such a big expense and say, yeah, okay, we have confidence this will stand the test of time. There won't be an IRS challenge here. We're comfortable giving the Clinton Foundation a lot of money to do projects outside of Little Rock, even though we haven't checked any of the legal paperwork to make sure that the thing actually exists because we're that fucking stupid. But anyway, there is information, there are instructions that they could have followed. And what I would, rather than talk simply about Epps and the committee, here what I'd be talking about is the news about Tish James trying to go after Donald Trump Jr. and Ivanka and Sr. over the idea that the calculations the Trumps used and the arguments the Trumps used to raise funds from investors to support their building projects were materially false and misleading, is the essence of what they're trying to argue. But, you know, so they're going to torture Trump, whose business was not using his brother and his idiot son and other relatives as, you know, receptacles for bribes. No, their business was to build these complexes around the world. And I'm sure they use sharp business practices. I don't think the real estate industry anywhere is known for having a bunch of angels, you know, kind of giving the customer exactly what they want and not pushing the envelope. I mean, it's a sharp business. And to make, maybe there are tougher places than Manhattan and New York City to real estate, but given the corruption in the unions, corruption in the cement industry, corruption among politicians, the fierce competition amongst the crowd that tries to put these buildings up, you know, I would guess there are probably issues of contention here. But on the other hand, when we think about the Trump family and the Trump operation and other builders inside New York City, how many jobs and income, how much income has been created for the vendors to these projects, for the workers in these projects, for the people who feed the workers and clothe the workers or whatever. I mean, the real estate industry, you could argue, is an industry that creates a lot of opportunity for government to get tribute off the income taxes paid by all these people. And it's the policy of New York City and New York State and these angry scolds in the supposed progressive wing of the Democrat Party and the Never Trumpers is that the business model of government should be to persecute all of your customers, that is to say the taxpayers, but to prosecute your best customers. And that's what we're saying to the world. Come to New York City, and do what you want to do for 50 years and your family for longer, and run for president. But if we don't like what you've done, we're going to torture you for the rest, you and your family, for the rest of your. That's why you should put more money inside New York City and state. I mean, a whole lot of these people are torturing the Trumps. They torture the Trump Foundation, the Trump University, perhaps fairly in those two cases. But they're ignoring the carpetbagger Clintons who continue. Their business model is to lie under oath and then to assume that they can game the prosecution and that nobody will have the patience and the persistence to get to the bottom and expose the frauds that they carried out. That's the Clinton way. They brought that way. Maybe they were taught that way in Arkansas and wherever Hillary was, in quotes, raised. I want to say reared. But
I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
Because I don't have experience in big developing, like Trump, obviously, but I was doing business with companies around New York City for many, many years. And one of the biggest jobs we ever had involved a huge internet company that I won't talk about, but there were all of these kind of hangers-on feeding at the trough. And they had various roles in the work that we were doing getting done. They had to approve this, give us access to that, etc. And at the end of the job, for which my company was paid very well, this guy he looked like somebody and acted like somebody you would see on an episode of The Sopranos. And I basically was invited to dinner by them with like 12 of their friends. And of course, I was to pay. Now, I'm running a private for-profit business, so if I choose to take a client out to dinner for $1,200, I'm allowed to do that. It's not corruption per se. But there was something, obviously I didn't want to do that. I was forced to pay for all these guys who barely had anything to do with the job. And it worked out to be a fairly sizable percentage of the overall cost of the job. And that was the only job I ever did for this company. But if I had continued to have a relationship with them, what I'm getting at is, and I'm not saying this is okay, but there's a certain amount of greasing of the wheels that has to happen to get business done in big cities. And I think that there's a big difference in doing that in the environment that you're in a for-profit company versus creating something that tells the world that it's this philanthropic thing that's going to be doing all this stuff, and it's a total lie. And it really puts a stark contrast on the attention that Letitia James is giving to Trump. I mean, it's inexcusable. It's obviously persecution, as you said.
Yeah. And the plain fact is, we've done so many shows, we don't need to go into these details again. The plain fact is that the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation and all of its successors and affiliates no part of it has ever been lawfully organized or operated as a real charity, an organization, for many reasons, many different reasons. It is obvious that that's the case. It is obvious that some people in the FBI and the big team that was assembled from 2001 to 2005 to look at it the first time, somebody had to see this. I know people who have been in the FBI, smart people. And maybe the deal is, if any potential crime involving a presidential or dynastic political family materializes, we need Team Dunderhead. We need, the dumbest people in the FBI, people who have drinking problems or cheating on their spouse or whatever it is. Get those people to take a hard look at this, so we can be very sure they're not going to see anything. At least the public won't find out about it, but we in the FBI will have all this dirt that we can use to bring the leaders of the country to heel in the crucial period between the election and the date that they want to try getting staff to work for them inside the White House. We're the people at the FBI who vet any of those high-level staffers. So there's, I think that the system has been gamed to a fairly well, and there's only going to be, I think, a resolution and a cleansing here if we start seeing mayhem in the financial markets, or maybe sadly mayhem internationally in some of these conflicts. So long as people are fat, dumb, and happy, their 401ks, the value are going up. If they have 401ks, if they, their credit cards are not too badly banged up, they have some money in the bank, their spouses and friends are happy, they're going. So long as that's happening, we see in the way in which we embrace this lunacy with Fauci and others, that people are too trusting of others who hold themselves out to be experts, and are not doing enough of their own work to say, hang on, California is talking about doubling the taxes. They're already astronomically high, but doubling the taxes of residents of California. Before you do that, let's take a look at the Silicon Valley Community Foundation and the many charities, including Jane Fonda's and others, that have been operating in these high tax states as conduits for favor exchange and maybe political corruption and money laundering. And let's start very simply. Doesn't matter the political background of the person. Let's simple checks. Are you operating in a high tax income tax state? Yes or no? Do you have, we'll start with assets of more than 10 million bucks, or maybe 100 million, but whatever the number is. And then beyond that, do you claim that you are doing business in the developing world? Yes or no? And anybody who ticks all those buckets, high state, certain size, either assets or revenue or both, and claiming to be helping people in the developing world where there are no legal systems to speak of, no regulatory mechanisms to check any of this, those people, instead of hiring another 80,000 IRS agents that Slow Joe wants to do, it's clear to me, with Lois Lerner's long tenure in there, in the tax exempt entity place, and the fact that there have been too few public investigations that result in convictions and fines, and send messages to these charity fraudsters. It's the time. We're well past the time that's required to go and scare the living daylights out of these fraudsters by making examples of some of the worst offenders, including, for example, Anthony Blinken and Joe Biden, who have been involved with their own fake charities, in my view.
Yeah, well, we had a comment here, Charles, on YouTube that I think it was Dick Morris who said the other day that Hillary Clinton may be preparing to run. A lot of people also feel like Joe Biden, first of all, they were amazed he could stand for 90 minutes. I don't think he's going to be able to run.
Did he get any tough questions, by the way?
Well, I don't know. People are saying he was getting angry, and it was amazing that he was able to stand for 90 minutes.
Well, but Dick Morris, is one of those people who when he worked for the Clintons, was very effective. And as time has passed, he's gotten, in my mind, less effective and less accurate in his projections. What he's arguing is that, this is let's sell Hillary as the political genius, the person, the perennial favorite who, been to the ball but never gets taken home. But this time she's going to get taken home or take us to the cleaners. That's an appealing top line story if you're trying to sell, it's time for a woman president and a redemption story and all this kind of stuff. But when you take a step back, and again, I'm not somebody who is as qualified as Dick Morris to make these observations. I don't get paid by people to help political campaigns the way he does. But Joe Biden ran as a moderate and cleared the contenders off the ticket with James Clyburn, Representative James Clyburn, selling to the country that a moderate Democrat with political experience could unify this country and get the job done. That was what we were sold. And that a lot of people who were tired of Trump said, I'll drink the Kool-Aid and it tastes good. But now in 2022, in January, today, actually a full year into his first year as resident of the United States, we have leftists, as is their wont, arguing that the 2020 election was a mandate, a clear and overarching mandate to push this country down a path that has failed in Venezuela, failed in Cuba, failed everywhere in the world that it's tried. And that election was not the election of a moderate, but it was a set of calling cards for the wildest, fruit bat element in the Democratic Party to go and use the Pelosi technique of ramming 2,000-page bills down the throats of congressmen and senators that nobody understands, whose consequences nobody understands. I mean, this is the place we're in. So in the Democrat Party, for Hillary to say, actually, I mean, for a while last year, she was saying she's always been a progressive, but now Morris is saying she's going to go and run in 2022, 3, and 4 as the moderate candidate. I mean, she's triangulating herself. I mean, the left, the most vocal people in the Democratic Party, don't like her to begin with, and certainly will not embrace the idea that the standard bearer of the Democrat Party should be a, quote, moderate. Worse, a moderate grifter married to a serial abuser of young women.
So, Charles, I've just done something hilarious. This is the live press conference on the White House. Is this the one? I think this is it. Wait, it doesn't say live, though. President Biden hosts a press conference. Yeah, it started 116 minutes ago. So while you were talking, I've re-added the YouTube, bring back the thumbs down indicator. Right. Joe Biden is presently at 625 thumbs up, 3,400 thumbs down, 3,497 thumbs down, and he's got 7,794 watching. Now, I want to put that in perspective for people because I'm pretty sure, Charles, you aren't the president of the United States, and I'm certainly not, and I haven't been on television as much as Joe Biden has, but at the height of Sunday with Charles, when the Jason Goodman YouTube channel had 120,000 subscribers, we would frequently get 2,500 to 3,000 live simultaneous viewers. And one of the most famous people on the planet, who's a big dope and the biggest loser, just about twice that, and tons of thumbs down.
Right. Do we have today a lot of thumbs down?
Well, do we? Let's check. I don't think so. We have, on this particular show on the Sunday with Charles channel, this is a good opportunity to remind people that they can subscribe to the Sunday with Charles YouTube channel, and it's a good way to keep Crowdsource the Truth resilient. But this is 34 thumbs up, 0 thumbs down. If we go to Crowdsource the Truth 5, the largest Crowdsource the Truth outlet on YouTube right now, we have 206 people watching us there, and thank you for that, everybody. That video has got 108 thumbs up and 0 thumbs down.
Right. So, I mean, Biden is certainly a polarizing figure at this point, but really, big companies, big enterprises, in theory, have might argue, or experts would argue, have compelling strategic advantages. Scale can be good, is a theory, right? But I think we're seeing in the Biden government, frankly, in the Trump government, certainly in the Obama, HW, and W, and Clinton governments, we're seeing that the federal government, American government, is too big to work effectively. It can't admit its mistakes. It can't learn from its mistakes. It's like the person who starts out normal weight and is ends up on that Blues Brothers movie. Your 4 fried chickens and your whatever, and you're eating 4 fried chickens a day for dinner, and 3.5 gallons of whatever you drink, and you weigh 800 pounds. I mean, that's what we have right now in this president and in this team. that would suggest that the smart thing for Joe to do was to go out, as he has done now with his press conference. Is the press conference finished, Jason, or is it still ongoing?
Well, it was just going a minute ago. Let's take a look again at the White House YouTube channel here. And
the reason I ask while you're looking,
yeah,
the reason I ask while you're looking is that this now, I mean, the choice of the time, 4:00 Eastern, means that it's definitely going to be picked up by the 6:00 news shows, and it's just a high risk approach. I mean, if you were going to try to work with this knucklehead, a smarter approach might have been to do it Saturday, so that if the guy screwed up, you'd ensure that nobody would care about it Saturday night. Maybe they'd think about it Sunday morning, Sunday evening. It'd be taught. You'd have a lot of time to walk things back. But do it this way, unless he hit, everything perfectly, that critics are going to have a field day starting in moments across many different channels. The left-leaning channels, if he's not left-leaning enough, we're going to have a problem with him. Fox is going to have a problem with him, probably. And it's going to exacerbate this feeling that Biden's failure is one of the. It's already been litigated. He's a failure. He's not a loser. He's a failure.
Well, biggest failure is not a show that we could make a parody of, but he is the biggest loser. Yeah. It's very distressing, Charles. I mean, for a long time I was reluctant to say anything overtly negative because I didn't want people watching to be distressed, trying to give people hope. Mm-hmm. But I don't think we can deny this. Joe Biden is a disaster. I think you'd call it an unmitigated disaster, right?
Yeah. And these storylines. I mean, you can't be in the business. The second you start trying to sell falsehood as truth from a position of authority, you're in a horrible position. I mean, not only are you a fool, but you're now putting the republic at risk, or if they like to call it a democracy, even though it's not one, the country at risk as an authority figure. You can't, if you know something, if you know something is wrong, you can't lie to the American public, particularly in this type of a forum. And if you don't know whether something is right or wrong, you probably shouldn't be president of the United States or anything else in a position of responsibility. So
there's just so much wrong with Joe Biden. It's difficult to even put it into words. I'm sorry I'm a little distracted today, Charles. As you're aware, it's a complicated and impromptu setup here in the hotel. I'm just still trying to deal. I accidentally blocked one of our valued viewers, and I'm trying to unblock that person.
I see. I thought you were trying to learn sign language, but so you could follow this press conference. The one to give people some to give people some hopeful news. Peter Schweitzer's book, I think, is out on Tuesday or Wednesday next week, and this is a book like other books of Peter's. Is very well researched. It's got supposedly over 1,000 footnotes, and it goes into the title of something. I think it's Red Hands.
Yeah,
and it goes into how red-handed, how elites in this country and both political parties and different elements have been selling all Americans out to the Chinese. And I'm certain he's already written several books about the Bidens in the past, so I would guess there's going to be explosive new information here that's not going to sit well for the Bidens or the Clintons or Bushes.
Scariest book he's ever written, he says.
Yeah, what does it say? Its release date's the 25th, so today's the 19th. So yeah, it's soon, and probably it will leak out. Oftentimes the way these things work is that obviously the book is printed already, and people have review copies. Maybe people have had review copies for a while, and soon we're going to see some of these juicy details.
Whoa,
if anything involves,
look who he's got here.
Yeah,
Elon Musk.
LeBron James.
Is this LeBron James? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. Bill Gates is there, I think.
Well, that's not a surprise, is it?
No. But my point is that I think should be useful information. We have who knows what's really going on with this whole Ghislaine Maxwell trial, but I answered some questions for our friend at Sputnik, Katya, that should be turned into an article imminently about what's behind this attempt to position Hillary as a viable candidate to run in 2024 and to win in 2024. And what did I make of what's going on with the Maxwell developments and the Epstein developments and other developments? So I have seen quite a bit of chatter now in multiple different internet-based, primarily sites in the Daily Mail and elsewhere, that something is going on with this trial. And I think the game plan is the only thing that Ghislaine has left, I think, is to hope that she can somehow either have a mistrial and a new trial and get off in the new trial, or failing that, and somehow she can get leniency in the sentencing by leaning on the John Does who might be named here to use their political power to restrain the system of justice from lock her in a jail cell and throwing away the key. But there's certainly a battle royal going on behind the scenes. Maybe some of the details will leak out, maybe some won't. One of the stories I read about, and where I know we're getting close to time here, so we maybe cover it on Sunday. There's a new charity, which is a hilarious name, called Gratitude America, that is Team America. Fuck yeah. Anyway, Gratitude America. And this is something
veterans.
This is something that is organized by a man called Darren Indyke, Indyke, who was a close associate of Epstein's. And I don't think enough focus has yet been put on Mr. Indyke to understand the source of his wealth, his experience, why he was so tied in with Epstein, what was he really doing. And then in addition to that, last night on Tucker, I watched briefly, Carlson mentioned that he's done a new series, I don't know if it's 3 or 5 part series, on George Soros. And in the same way that he suggested that the January 6th committee was hopelessly corrupt, he's going after Soros, which is a job we've been on for a long time. But Tucker has a much bigger platform, and hopefully he's gotten close to the truth on Soros. But there's somebody who has such a diabolically bad track record, who does not have the interests of any American, honest Americans at heart, who has somehow managed to amass a gigantic fortune, and who is funding the efforts in cities like New York and elsewhere, California, states like California, to put in these prosecutors who are deaf, dumb, and blind, who are anti-law and order. It's not social justice. They want to foment chaos. And yet
they're basically
people
fulfilling the desires of the Weather Underground and Marxists who wanted to empty the prisons. I guess, his role as Emperor Palpatine wasn't paying enough, so he needed to destroy currencies and countries to, make ends meet, Charles. It's tough out there being a criminal.
Yeah, it's tough. You got all these mansions. You got this gigantic carbon footprint with your private jets and big estates, but everyone else, we should all get beyond meat. Eat insects.
Well, but speaking of jets, Charles, a lot of our viewers are very interested in 5G and some of the challenges of new technologies. This is interesting because typically if you say anything about 5G other than go get it, they tell you you are a conspiracy theorist. But now international airlines are suspending some US flights over 5G uncertainty. And there's a lot of articles actually about major international airlines scrambling to modify or cancel flights over uncertainty about the potential interference between new 5G cell phone services and critical airplane technologies. Doesn't it seem a bit idiotic that we've been hearing about 5G for certainly, 3 or 4 years, and people who run airplanes haven't tested it before now?
I don't know. Not in the motto of the government is here is stuck on stupid. I mean, it's just stuff that you would expect idiots to get done properly is just not done at all well. I mean, you are not rich because you borrow more money and fail to repay it. Okay, you're not rich because you manipulate the system to bring interest rates down to allow people who shouldn't be borrowing money to borrow even more money that they're never going to be able to repay. That is not a way to build wealth, but that's exactly what we've done since December 31st, 2008, overall in this country and in the advanced, quotes, economies. More to come.
Absolutely. Well, Charles, we will be back on Sunday, and I want to thank everybody for watching today. Apologize for the delay in getting started, but it's always difficult traveling around, going to these hotels. We will see everybody on Sunday. And thanks to everybody who's watching. I hope that people will become sponsors on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. It's very expensive for me to come to these hotels and have these technical problems. But thanks everybody for sticking with us and joining us through the broadcast. Very curious to see what the major reaction to The Biggest Loser's press conference is going to be. And with that, Charles, thank you for another great presentation, and I'll see you on Sunday. Don't miss Lee Stranahan later tonight at 8:30. I'm very interested in hearing this. Lee is going to be talking about the Opium Wars and how the history of the Opium Wars and what happened there are contributing to what's happening today. Very interesting topic that I don't know that much about, so that'll be good. People will be able to tune in to High Dive with Lee Stranahan at 8:30 tonight. So get onto Subscribestar and Patreon and watch us there.